What is up, gamers, and welcome back to another video. So today we finally got the confirmation for the last 4 ride lines we'll be seeing in the new Buddyfight collab set, and I figured, you know what, let's have some fun. Let's try to predict what we think some of these cards are going to do, specifically just the buddy monsters of the characters that were revealed. I don't want to get all into the weeds and try to theory craft 8,000 cards. I just want to stick to just the buddy monsters and then kind of like branch off from there maybe if some interesting things arise. But not to dilly-dally, let's get right into it, starting off with our first boy, Tetsuya, and his buddy, Osmodai. So, with Osmodai being one of the first triple rares all the way back in set 1 of Buddyfight, he doesn't really do anything crazy. He's just an on-place, you can discard a card from your hand to pop a monster, which in Buddyfight, it's kind of mid, in Vanguard, even midder. I assume what they're going to do is the same thing they did with Drum Bunker Dragon, where they just give it Jackknife's original text, where Osmodai can just now search one of his various other forms that I'm sure we're going to get, and you just place it on top of himself. It'll just be another way to toolbox into specific versions of Osmodai that we're going to get, and I don't think he'll do much else other than that. One thing that is interesting, though, is that I wonder if this is going to be a grade 1. As you've seen with a lot of the card reveals, they're sticking pretty close to the original size of the monsters. Size 2s are grade 2s, size 1s are grade 1s, and size 0s are grade 0s, as we've confirmed with the new Boomerang Dragon. So, there's a good chance this Osmodai and a lot of his other forms will be grade 1s, and Tetsuya's deck will focus around playing a lot of grade 1 monsters, just like the 72 pillars in Buddyfight focus on playing a lot of size 1 monsters. The other thing that will be interesting to see is how they handle Magic World's identity of the Spell Slinger deck. Magic World loves to play a lot of spells, but in Vanguard, can only play one spell or order a turn. So I would imagine Tetsuya has some sort of text printed on them and lets him, like, I don't know, play 2 orders per turn or something. Something that kind of emulate that spell slinging feel without completely breaking Vanguard wide open. I'm going to assume it's going to be something like either you can play 2 orders a turn, or maybe something more like Zorga where it tries to mash 2 orders together to accomplish the same goal. Now next up is my boy Zanya Kisaragi and his buddy Suki Kage. So, I really hope they don't give us Nano Machine Body Replacement. Now you see, in Cotton World, we don't really have Soul Guard. Instead, Cotton World, the ninjas get this thing called Nano Machine Body Replacement, which is if this monster were ever to be destroyed, you can discard a card from your hand to keep it on board. Now in Buddyfight, that's not too bad. But in Cardfight Vanguard, that sucks. In the context of Vanguard, Nano Machine Body Replacement is so much worse than Soul Guard. Not even Soul Guard, because Vanguard has buffed Soul Guard. Soul Guard is just better in Vanguard because they changed the way it's worded. It's not even when it's destroyed, it's when it would leave Rear Guard. So, hopefully they don't try to just verbatim give us Nano Machine Body Replacement technique, because that would suck and be very, very bad and much worse than Soul Guard. What I'm assuming Suki Kage is going to do is, instead of just having Nano Machine Body Replacement, which it does because, you know, it's a really old triple rare, so cards didn't do a lot back then, I'm going to assume Suki Kage is going to give us some sort of way to get one step closer to making Gojin Maru, another card I'm pretty confident we're going to get. Now, Gojin Maru is a card from Buddyfight that you get by combining Suki Kage and his buddy Byakuya. Now, I'm assuming this is going to be the big boss monster that the Zanya deck wants to resolve, but the only thing is, the things that make Gojin Maru good in Buddyfight don't really work in Vanguard at all. Now, we've seen with a lot of cards, they're doing their absolute best to just translate these cards as close to verbatim as they can. They want these Vanguard cards to function almost identically to their Buddyfight counterparts, and while I can respect that, it's going to be a little tough with Gojin Maru. You see, Gojin Maru doesn't really do anything. He's kind of just keyword slop. He has Shadow Dive, which lets you attack directly, ignoring the monster in your opponent's center. He has the Move ability, he has Double Attack, and he has Soul Guard. What made Gojin Maru good in the game is that A, it had 7k defense, which was a pretty big butt. In Vanguard, having a big butt doesn't really matter because you're kind of locked in what grade you are. This is being a size 2 is probably going to be a grade 2 and thus is going to have 10,000 power. How big a butt it has isn't really going to matter, especially when it's going to be a rear guard, most likely. The second ability has his move, which is really good in Buddyfight because what it allows you to do is attack with your item on your turn, and then on your opponent's turn, move your big 7k defense monster into your center so now your opponent has to deal with it. In Buddyfight, your item's in your front row. It's on your Vanguard, so you get to swing with it no matter what's in your center. So move it doesn't do anything in Vanguard. And maybe they give it like a special intercept, but like that doesn't really do what move is supposed to do. And the last ability it has is Shadow Dive, which just allows you to attack your opponent ignoring the monster in their center. But again, in Vanguard, your opponent is front and center. They are the Vanguard. There's nothing really stopping you. It's going to be interesting to see if they do give us Gojimaro, how they interpret Shadow Dive in Vanguard, because, well, if you write it verbatim, it's broken. You would just have to say your opponent can't guard, which is ridiculous. So I'm not entirely sure how they're going to get around that. Maybe it'll have some kind of ability that makes it harder for your opponent to guard. It makes it more difficult. I would imagine that's the route they go to sort of accomplish the idea of Shadow Dive. But we're going to have to wait and see, because the big defense, having move, and having Shadow Dive are all things that can't really exist in Cardfight Vanguard. So I'm interested to see what they do with Gojimaro and how they change him to make him really, really cool. Now, what I really hope they give us are Secret Sword impacts. So for those who don't know, when Cotton World first came out, before Gojimaro was even a thing, Cotton World's original game plan was this card's Secret Sword Lethal Formation. This was an impact that when you played it, instead of just blowing your opponent up, instead you played it and then you got to search your hand, deck, or drop zone for a different impact that then you would tuck under it face down. Now you had one of 3 impacts to choose from, the 3 different Secret Swords, and they all had a different activation condition. And what they did was when your opponent triggered their activation condition, you would flip them over and deal your opponent some damage. It was basically like setting a trap card, but you needed to predict what they were going to do, because you either had the one that blows up when they equip an item, the one that blows up when they cast a spell, or the one that blows up when they call a monster. So you kind of have to predict, does your opponent want to call monsters? Are they going to equip an item? Do you think they're going to cast a spell next turn? You pick the item you think they're going to be most likely to trigger, and you set that one. But now your opponent has to play this mind game of, what Secret Sword did they set? Did they set the one? Do they think I'm going to cast a spell? Maybe I don't cast spells next turn, so I don't trigger it, but it could be the item one. And I had this item I really want to equip. Do I want to equip this and risk them popping their Secret Sword because I equipped an item? I don't know. Was it good? No, it was terrible, but it was a really, really fun and flavorful minigame that I kind of hope they give us. The only problem is this is another card that I don't think is going to translate well to Vanguard, because your options are kind of going to be something like, maybe they play an order, arm a card, and then call a unit. But if that's the case, you kind of always pick call a unit, because you're not going to guarantee they're going to play an order. That's probably the last one you're going to pick. Arm a card, they're probably going to do pretty early on, like Gao's going to do it on turn 1. So a lot of the mini game gets kind of lost, but I don't know, maybe Bushi will cook and give us something really great and give us a really great Secret Sword mini game, or, you know, they could just ignore it entirely and just give us Gojimaro support. I don't really know. I'm really hoping for the Secret Swords. Will it be good? Probably not, but I think it's going to be a blast to play, and if we do get the Secret Swords, that's probably the deck I'm going to be building and playing the most. So those are pretty easy. Now it's time to talk about the weird ones. They're giving us Azid Haka and Ghetto. And for those of you that don't know and don't play Buddyfight, they don't have worlds associated with them. Like, Jackknife is from Dragon World, right? Suki Kage, you're playing Cotton World. Osmodai, you're playing Magic World. Azid Haka and Ghetto have their own flags, and what they do is let you build decks not around worlds, but around attributes. So Azid Haka lets you play cards from any world so long as they're dragons, and Ghetto lets you play cards from any world so long as they are 100 demons. Now, this opens up really interesting design space, because what this lets them do is now, say for Azid Haka, they can print a bunch of like Darkness, Dragon World, and Ancient World cards specifically for Ozzy and not have to worry about them being generically splashable, because the problem with Ozzy is it's generic dragon slot pile. So you're kind of free to print some pretty busted stuff for Azid Haka specifically, but not have to worry about it getting splashed and other things and breaking those down the line. So it's kind of nice. We might be seeing some really broken Darkness, Dragon World, and Ancient World cards in this set that, you know, only work in Azid Haka, so I think that's cool. But what is Azid Haka himself going to do? I think they're going to keep the board wipe portion of him. The idea that he's able to attack every monster on the board. I'm sure they'll give him some sort of super Dragonic Kaiser Vermilion effect that lets him swing into your opponent's entire board, and then also give him the ability to destroy items. Azid Haka, real big on blowing things up. I'm gonna guess that they're gonna give it another way to search the item, because trying to destroy Azid Haka is a lot more difficult in Vanguard than it is in Buddyfight. In Buddyfight, you just put it in the center and your opponent kind of has to blow it up if they ever want to deal you damage. But in Vanguard, it's gonna be a rear guard, so your opponent's just gonna not attack it. So I'm sure they're gonna give it some other way to search the item other than it being destroyed. The interesting thing is I doubt they're gonna keep the size 4 aspect. So for those that don't know, in Buddyfight, you can have monsters on your field up to a size of 3. Azid Haka is a size 4. So you're going to have to find some shenanigans to actually get him onto the board. Is Vanguard going to keep these shenanigans? I don't know. I could easily see them just reducing it down to a size 3 that you just call, or a grade 3, because it's Vanguard, that you just call. Or maybe they give us some goofy, like, Valkyrion type stuff and keep it to be a grade 4 that you call as a rear guard, but you have to find some weird workaround that lets you call it as a rear guard even though you have a grade 3 Vanguard. Or they just print a continuous on the Vanguard that just says you can call grade 4 Azid Hakas to your rear guard circle. That's actually probably, that's probably what they're actually going to do. That's probably what they'll do. They'll just give them some continuous. It's like, you can call grade 4 Azid Haka. It kind of sucks. Hopefully they don't do that, but you never know. We'll have to see. To summarize, I think they will maintain the aspect that lets you board wipe and pop all your opponent's items and kind of rip their board to shreds. I think they're going to find another way to get the item rather than having it have to be destroyed, because that's not really how Vanguard works. So maybe like when you take a damage or when you hit a certain damage threshold, you can search the item, something like that. And then I don't think they're going to keep the size 4 aspect, but if they do keep the size 4, make it a grade 4, I'm sure they'll just print some sort of continuous on the Vanguard that just says you can call size 4s. And finally, we have Yami Ghetto. Now, this guy's pretty straightforward. There's nothing too crazy going on. The only thing is, how do we translate Thunder Mine? So Thunder Mine is an ability that whenever your opponent triggers it, like a landmine, take a damage. It's different in every card with Thunder Mine's case. For this Yami Ghetto specifically, it's whenever they nullify an attack, or I guess in Vanguard speak, it would be like activate a Sentinel. They take a damage. The problem is we can't just be dealing people damage at Guard Fight Vanguard. You don't have life points like in Buddy Fight. We have a hard set 6. Maybe you can hit some heals and get more damage out, but for the most part, you have 6 before you have 5 before you're dead. When you hit the 6, the game's over. So you have 5 you can take. So Thunder Mine, not really going to work like that, but there's 2 ways they can do it. They can keep one of 2 aspects. They either get to keep the damage aspect, in that when it triggers, your opponent does take a damage. It's just that that trigger condition is going to have to be so either hard to achieve or so one-off that it only really happens once per game, right? It's going to have to be kept to a very limited quantity of actions that can actually occur to justify just pinging your opponent for a damage. Or the other route they can take is have more varied trigger activations, like when your opponent calls a monster, when they activate, when they equip an item, when they play an order, when they activate a sentinel. Keep the trigger additions like that, and then just tone back the effects. I think an equally good one to like taking damage would be discard a card. I think that would be kind of cool. Like Thunder Mine, when your opponent calls a unit, they discard a card. Or when they activate a sentinel, they discard a card, so you like add cost to the sentinel. Maybe Thunder Mine could be when they call a unit, they CB1. In Buddy Fight, Thunder Mine always deals a damage based on a certain condition, but like in Buddy Fight, that's a ping. You have life points. It's just one ping. In Vanguard, you can't really just like lightly ping somebody. You deal a 5th of their available resources before the 6th one kills them. So either they have to change the condition to make it balanced around dealing your opponent a whole damage, or they just change the effect from, instead of dealing a damage, maybe it's making you discard a card. Maybe something gets like minus 5k or something. Maybe they have to CB. Maybe they have to drop a soul. A way to like resource attrition your opponent out of stuff by them taking game actions. That's more in line with what Yami Ghetto is trying to do. But that one, we're just going to have to see which route they end up taking. And I think either route could be cool. I'm more on team get rid of the damage ping and just make it a different effect, so that we can keep the cool costs of like when they activate a sentinel, when they call a monster, an opponent has to tiptoe around your thunder mines and try not to blow themselves up by playing the game. I think if they keep the actually dealing a damage, well, now the effect is going to be either a one-off effect that only happens once per game, or like so hard to achieve it never comes up and it never feels like your opponent is actually playing the thunder mine minigame. Hopefully they get rid of the damage dealing aspect, they make it something less severe but still really severe, like discarding a card, CBing one, dropping a soul, something like that, and we get to kind of keep the Thunder Mine play style intact. But yeah, that's just my theory about what these cards are going to do. I'm sure you have some of your own, and I would love to see y'all's thoughts in the comments about what you think these cards are going to do. And then, as the weeks go by and we see more and more reveals, we can go back and look at, where we were close or where, we were super off the mark. And this can be like a little fun video to come back to and look at just how close we got to inside the mind of Bushiroad, trying to adapt one game into another game. But yeah, with that being said, let me know what you think down in the comments. Let me know what kind of cards you want to see now that we know all of the flags that we're getting. And with that being said, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.